Is Last Epoch dying? No, obviously.
Hey folks, this is Riker, and what happened to Last Epoch? Everyone was talking about this game. Every
Yeah.
ARPG streamer was playing it. It felt like every content creator was jumping off the sinking ship that was the SS Diablo 4 bad and onto this life raft of Last Epoch.
Yep.
And then something strange happened. And there was good reason that Last Epoch was so popular. It was everything that so many people who were disappointed in D4 wanted. A game with a rich skill system, deep itemization, crafting, a solid endgame offering that has a fun gameplay loop and meaningful progression in it,
Yeah.
and a robust trade system as well that doesn't penalize players who refuse to trade. And I remember being at the Last Epoch booth at Gamescom this summer in Germany, and 95% of the people that I spoke to who tried the demo at the booth expressed disappointment in D4 and said they were loving Last Epoch.
I mean, who doesn't express disappointment in D4? The only reason that Diablo 4 has maintained relevance only because at this point it is just that bad. But it's so boring to complain about it being bad now that even I'm not doing it. And I love complaining about how bad D4 is and how Todd Ferguson deserves the rope and whatnot. Because it is true.
Even a lot of Path of Exile players loved Last Epoch. It was basically a version of Path of Exile with a lot of bloat and complexity trimmed away, but still with a richness of depth to it. So if Last Epoch was everything that everyone wanted, why is no one playing it anymore? When it launched out of early access on February 21st, Last Epoch peaked at over 260,000 concurrent players on Steam within days of launch.
Wow, so it actually maintained a graph like this for 2 months. That's not bad. So, obviously, it's very predictable that this is going to be the discussion, and the reason for that is very simple. This is what happens to all good games. This is just the natural thing that happens to good games, and honestly, also to bad games. For bad games, though, it happens much, much faster. It's like a steep mountain or whatever. So, yeah, this is completely normal. This was expected. This also happens to Path of Exile. This happens to literally any game that's good. People play it, and until there's a new expansion, the player rate just drops off. PoE, I think on average, maintains the average player's attention for 2 weeks after a league launches, and after that it's just a complete dip. This is normal. This is what you expect. And when the new expansion, not expansion, but when the new season comes out, guess what? Whoop! This graph goes up again. And people are going to talk about it again. People are going to do this and that about it. They're going to discuss is the new league good and all of that. And after that, probably 2 weeks, just like PoE, whoop! This is what happens. I mean, games cannot just go here and maintain their relevance forever unless you're Helldivers and you're, like, literally doing the craziest thing and rebalancing the game and adding new things every week and whatnot. It just doesn't happen.
But by 1 month post-release, Last Epoch was seeing less than a third of its peak player base still logging in daily. Today, we're less than 2 months since release, and we're seeing about 16,000 peak daily concurrent.
Oh, that's actually more than I expected. That's good. That's good. Obviously, it's not going to be PoE numbers because PoE is the biggest game to dethrone at the moment. But keep in mind, this is just the launch of the game. So they have things to improve and whatnot. And again, their launch was horrendous because people didn't get in. And that was a huge problem. Their peak could have been so much better if people could log in. Because that did destroy hype. And hype matters. Hype matters a lot.
Players. Now, in fairness, 16,000 is still a respectable number, but it does represent only...
It's more than I expected. I honestly... I did not... I didn't pre-watch the video, but obviously, this is the only thing that you can talk about this in this sense. And I expected the player numbers to be on 3-ish K, but 16K, that's impressive. Wow.
Only about 6% of what the peak was at maximum hype less than 2 months ago. 94% of people have stopped playing Last Epoch.
Yeah.
And the question is, why? Is this
because they played it enough. It's a great example, a great alternative example from different genre is Hogwarts Legacies. It was a good game. Everyone liked it. No one really complained about it too much. But there's no replayability to it. You do it, and, after you have played it, it's like, okay, that was fun. Uninstall. You got your fun out of it, and now you're just waiting for essentially a expansion or something like that. And then the hype up is going to be drummed up again. Now, there are examples like Elden Ring. I wanted to say Elder Scrolls, but that would be a lie. Elden Ring is a good example of a game that kinda is almost that, but then it has a community that cares about it longer because there's different builds, and it's a longer game in that sense. And, there are other things like PvP, and the lore needs to be explored, alternative things. That keeps people around longer, but even that has a downfall. Again, all of these games are not going to keep their numbers up.
just normal new game attrition? Or is this part of a bigger looming issue? Before we dive into the bigger picture, we can see that a look at a few other analytics tells the same story. Google's search interest in Last Epoch is down to 6% of what it peaked at around launch. And
wow, who would have expected that?
YouTube search interest is barely better at about 8% of their peak. On
Yeah, all of these numbers kind of work the same together, yes.
Twitch, this game went from an average of 21,000 concurrent viewers throughout its release month to
That's
about
good.
400 concurrents today. By comparison, Path of Exile sees an average of at least 10 to 20,000 concurrent viewers during the first month of a league and maintains a few thousand towards the end of a league. And
yeah, Path of Exile has the biggest retention. That is true.
even Diablo 4 sees an average of a couple thousand concurrent viewers. Now, I'm not one to point to
I mean, we're kind of pushing that there.
Twitch metrics to say a game is dead, but for those who do point to that and say Diablo 4 is dead based on its Twitch numbers, then Last Epoch is a pile of ashes. And to some degree, this is...
I mean, that's not true. Again, it just depends on new releases.
part of a normal pattern you see with modern ARPGs.
And Diablo 4 is much wider. Again, you have 200k and those numbers versus literally multiple millions for Diablo 4. Was it Blizzard's best-selling game? I think it was, or it was the fastest-selling game. They probably sold more than 20 million copies of that game. So the drop-off is literally in the hundreds of times larger, okay? And, well, Path of Exile. Again, Path of Exile is the thing that needs to be dethroned. Path of Exile has good numbers. No one can argue with it. People are interested in what people do in Path of Exile. You know, again, it's bigger in every sense. And it has more player attention because it has more.
Ebb and flow of players whenever there's a content drop. One new ARPG that's trying to break from the mold in a number of different ways is No Rest for the Wicked, which is releasing into early access today and is a sponsor of today's video. Moon Studios, the developer...
No Rest for the Wicked looks good, but it's not a Diablo game, okay? Saying No Rest for the Wicked is a comparison to Diablo 4, Last Epoch, or Path of Exile. No. Those same people think that Lost Ark is comparable to like Diablo or whatnot. No, it's not even. Dude, it's not even close. Okay, relax.
As for the conventional modern ARPGs, how does Last Epoch, a game that so successfully pulls off the modern ARPG formula, lose 94% of its player base? It's not because...
Well, there is one bad thing about Last Epoch, and you're seeing it right here again. I have been saying this since I started playing Last Epoch before it was even widely spread or known by people. I played it before, I played it before it was cool, okay? It's the graphics. A lot of people are gonna choose to not play Last Epoch because of the graphics. Because this does take getting used to. It is something that's not gonna fit everyone. And that's where Diablo 4 actually wins a lot, by the way, and just in general, that their graphics are extremely easy to accept by everyone, and that's a good thing. If you want to be long-term successful, you need this. And this is my biggest complaint about Last Epoch. They need to get their graphics smoother. They need to make the beginner's skills look better and feel better and whatnot. If you do that, your retention is gonna skyrocket.
Because a competing ARPG released new content, Diablo 4's Gauntlet certainly didn't pull people away from Last Epoch, and by the time Path of Exile's
I mean, anyone who said that the Gauntlet is gonna be good, or matters some, or people are gonna care about it, lives in an alternative dimension.
Necropolis expansion launched, Last Epoch's numbers were already way down. Did some other hit game like Palworld or Helldivers 2 come along to steal all the players? Unlikely.
No.
Palworld released in January. Helldivers 2 is a very different kind of game and also released a little earlier than Last Epoch. Is it just normal for new games to lose so many players so quickly?
Yeah. Yeah. It's normal for new games and old games. The difference is it a good game or a bad game? Okay? Again, if the game is good, people are just gonna, have light conversations about it here or there, or maybe this is gonna be the best that happens. Again, only if something is ridiculously shit do people talk about it a lot. Again, people talking about, for example, the Suicide Squad game, there's way more talk about that game being bad than there are people playing it in general, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Again, bad things stick longer than good things in the minds of people because it's just so much more fun to talk about bad stuff.
Well, sometimes, sure. If you look back at other big games that released so far in 2024, you see that Palworld was an insane smash hit that reached 2 million concurrent players on Steam on January
Palworld's retention actually was phenomenal.
27th, and now it's only seeing 66,000.
66,000 is still really good. And by the way, this graph looks kind of close to Last Epoch, yeah. And it's also 2 months. Palworld had great retention. They retained 200k players for, what is it, around this long? Which is crazy. Considering there was not honestly that much to do in the game. But it still retained people for such an extended period of time. Again, this is good. This is good.
It's lost 97% of its player base, an even worse figure than Last Epoch, but Palworld is kind of an outlier. No game on Steam sustains millions of players, except for maybe Counter-Strike 2. And 66,000 still keeps it within the top 25 most played games on Steam. Helldivers 2 hit 458,000 concurrent players on Steam.
Helldivers, again, is the only actual real outlier. Because they update the game, they have the, dynamic storytelling, they have the community, they have the memes, they have the fresh everything. Helldivers 2 is the only actual outlier. I honestly cannot even think of another outlier that's Helldivers 2. Because this is insane, look at this. This is where it starts, and it doesn't dip. Why doesn't it dip more? Because this is like 3 times better than Last Epoch or pretty much any other game. Than Palworld, than anything. Yeah? You see that? And look at this. This is the first month, then it gets popular, it keeps being popular, a month passes, and we're in the 3rd month, and the graph is going like this. Not like this like it should. Every good or bad game is gonna go like this no matter what. Except Helldivers, because they update like there's no tomorrow. I mean, there are literal channels that are making livings currently just by making Helldivers videos about what update they have introduced this time, 3 days after the last one. It's insane. And Helldivers is different because it's a shooter game. In games like, for example, Last Epoch, Diablo 4 even, Path of Exile, there is no such thing as a smart idea to introduce a single item once in a week, because no one's gonna give a shit. No one's gonna play it. This is why things like the Gauntlet can fundamentally never actually bring back people, because The game has been out, and are you gonna log in for one stupid thing and that's it? No, that's not fun. That's dumb and boring.
On February 23rd. That's a little bit closer to Last Epoch scale. And today it's still at 167,000. That's almost 2 months later, and it still has 36% of its player base. Tekken 8 reached 50,000 players on Steam on January 29th. It's down to 12,000.
Yeah, but Tekken is a niche thing, though. Again, look at this. Its peak is only 50k, though. Admittedly, that's a good retention, but Tekken is a niche title. You know, it's known, obviously, but it is a niche title, so it's a little bit different.
Now that's 24% left. Sons of the Forest peaked at 54,000. Following its launch out of early access on February 22nd. It's down to 10,000 players today. That's about
That's good, though.
19%
That's good,
now.
actually, because Sons of the Forest is not that niche of... Well, it is a niche of a title, but it's not in that sense.
Now, Last Epoch was far more popular than these last two games, yet its player counts today are roughly on par with them. And before you go and say, well, Helldivers is a different kind of game, it's meant to be infinitely replayable, I mean, ARP...
Last Epoch also is infinitely replayable. Do not get that wrong. Helldivers is infinitely replayable, and so is Last Epoch, Diablo 4, Path of Exile, and all of that jazz. But it is a different game that works with different things.
RPGs are meant to be games that we could play for hundreds and thousands of hours.
Yep.
We're not talking about a single-player RPG that you're...
Except Diablo 4, because they completely ruined that aspect of the game also. Again, it's always... It's always just fun to speak about crap, isn't it? And Diablo 4 is the biggest crap of them all.
done with after 130 hour
I'm sorry, I should say Diablo 3.5 now.
playthrough. Now, I want to be explicitly clear about something throughout all this. None of this is a criticism of Last Epoch. This is a symptom of a bigger...
Is he gonna show the graph of what's it called, Path of Exile? Let's actually look if we can find PoE Necropolis player number crap. Let's see if we can find it. Necropolis has by... Oh, we have seen this. Okay, this is like a small thing that we have seen. Okay, yeah, you can't see the full thing, sadly, though, so that's a bad graph. Let's check images. Up. There we have it. Yeah, this is... Days since the league. Okay, yeah. Let me show you this right here real quick. Let me open it in a new tab so we can actually get a decent picture of it. Okay, let me show you. Okay, is this the right one? Yes, that's the right screen. Okay, see? This is the Path of Exile thing. Player attention. And this is the Necropolis League. Well, actually, this is all the leagues. And as you can see, it's the same thing. This is the start, where it's 100% of the people who are playing, because it's literally the peak. This is like day 1 or day 2, depending on, you know, is day 2 maybe a weekend or something. And then you have it, the drop-off. Look at this. Look at this. 14 days in. I said 2 weeks, right? See? It's already more than a 50% drop-off. And then it just slowly tapers out at like 6%, and that's pretty much it. This is what happens to all the good games. Path of Exile is the same. The Diablo 4, even as a bad game, by the way, follows the exact same thing, only it's probably a way steeper decline. For example, when Season 1 came out, bruh, I played for 2 days, and I stopped. It was just so goddamn bad. Season 2 I played for... I think a week and a half or something, and Season 3 I played for 3 or 4 days. Again, just how it is.
problem with modern ARPGs. Last Epoch is a great game. It has tons of depth. It has all the systems in it that it should have. It checks all the boxes of what fans want included in an ARPG. Is it perfect in every way? No, but it's an amazing game. But after you spent a couple of weeks with it, leveling up a character, delving into the endgame, you've pretty much experienced what there is to experience. Maybe you can squeeze out some more playtime by trying out a few different builds, but for most players, you're basically done. There just isn't enough endgame content to keep most people going for longer. And I'm part of that 94% who stopped playing.
Okay, this is also not the right thing to say. The reality is most people don't get to the end game. The fact that the average player plays for like 14 days, or maybe if you could say 20 days if you want to be super generous, they don't reach max level. They do not reach the actual end game. The average person finishes Path of Exile campaign in something like 15-ish hours. 10 is pretty fast for the average player, which is still pretty slow for the people who play it a lot and, know how to do everything in rush. But, and the average playtime per session for average player is something like 1 or 2 hours. So, finishing just the campaign in Path of Exile, for example, is people experiencing the full game. They don't even get into the actual late game. Same thing, by the way, with Last Epoch. People play the game, people play, for 2 weeks, and they are maybe at the very, 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 very start of the actual end game. That's how it works. That's how it is. For Diablo 4, it's different. And that's why the end game is such a huge issue for Diablo 4. Because there's nothing to experience in the early game. The early game is flat, dull, and no one wants it. No one wants to actually play Diablo 4 until they get to at least World Tier 3. So, for Diablo 4, people experience the game way faster also. So their drop-off, again, just by that itself, is huger.
Hey, I love Last Epoch. I don't see myself playing it again until the start of the next cycle. And I'm sure a lot of players are going to return at that point. The numbers are going to jump way up again.
Yep.
And then after a couple more weeks, they're going to peter back down.
Yep.
We saw the same thing happen with Diablo 3 seasons. Everyone comes back for a week or two before...
No, that did not happen for Diablo 3. That's cope. Diablo 3 was absolute horseshit. No one liked it. No one talked about it. It was so bad that people even didn't talk about it dying. That's how bad Diablo 3 was.
Or disappearing for the next 2.5 months. Path of Exile's retention fares better, but even then, half the players are gone by week 3 of a new expansion, and 2 months in, we see about 20% left. So when even Path of Exile, the most content-rich ARPG out there, with the greatest amount and variety of endgame content to engage with, can't retain more than 20% of its player base after...
We saw the graph. That's not true. 20% are gone roughly by week 4, and by month 1, it's like 10% of the player base are left. But by the way, that's still good. Not saying. It's just he's kind of pushing the numbers a bit high here. But if we can trust, admittedly, the graph that I found. But I'm pretty sure I have seen that graph multiple times at this point. So yeah. Path of Exile has the biggest retention, but that's to be expected because it actually has the biggest longevity for hardcore fans.
For 2 months, and is down to like 10% after 3 months. How could a new kid on the block like Last Epoch hope to do better? For a game released by a small indie team making their first game, Last Epoch has been a huge success. They sold 1 million copies before they even fully launched. Path of Exile has had 10 years to add endgame content, and no new game.
Yep, this is why I'm so hopeful about Last Epoch, because the reality, again, is very simple. It's the start it had was beyond expectations huge. It was beyond huge. I did not expect crazy numbers like this. And again, it's not even season 1 technically, right? Or wait, maybe it counts as season 1. I'm not sure. I stopped playing. But then again, I have also stopped playing PoE and Diablo 4. And the next game I play, by the way, is the one that has the next season. I think it's Diablo 4, right? In 20 days it has a new season or something like that. But yeah, so that's going to be the winner. And I'm going to play Diablo 4 for hopefully more than 4 days. And then I'm going to call it shit, like everyone else.
can possibly match that. Every new ARPG is going to feel smaller in comparison, and like it has less to do in the endgame, and honestly, that includes Path of Exile too, and I'm concerned about it. Now, the irony is that both Diablo 4 and Last Epoch suffer from the same problem, a lack of endgame.
Dude, when Path of Exile 2 launches, by the way, there's gonna be so many people who are gonna be Path of Exile 1 players, and they're gonna be pissed that Path of Exile 2 is not big enough. That's unironically gonna be a unavoidable thing. People are gonna complain about it, which, by the way, I instantaneously think is gonna be stupid because, again, it's still new. Yes, it's Path of Exile 2, but it can't just take everything from Path of Exile 1 and just, do that. That's not how it works. Relax.
Content to keep players engaged in the long term. The difference is that Diablo 4 had some other major systemic problems, but even when all that is going to be
Everything, he means. Literally everything.
fixed, will ultimately
When? By season 20, maybe.
arrive probably at the same place we are with Last Epoch. There's just not enough endgame content to keep most people playing for more than a few weeks. Last Epoch proves that even when you
Okay, when people play... Okay, Diablo 4, probably... My assumption is Diablo 4, considering how poorly and shittily it is paced, and how... well, little replayability it honestly has, because keep in mind, Diablo 4 doesn't have replayability. You can't do such a thing as play a necromancer and then make another necromancer. You don't need to, because you can one button respec everything and you have all the gear necessary for your respec spec to work. It's not a problem. In Last Epoch, though, when I started playing, you know what I did first? I made a necromancer. You know what I did second? I made a reaper. You know what I did third? I made another necromancer. The replayability is way huger. And the replayability in Path of Exile, if you actually delve into the into it a little bit deeper, is even higher at this point, technically, for hardcore players. So yeah,
you do everything else right, players are content gobbling monsters with voracious appetites. And the way modern RPGs are built and balanced, the way they release new content, the way the endgame loops are designed, it results in a formula that is simply unable to sustain long-term engagement for the majority of players. And I think that's the issue. Modern RPGs are basically being developed to be devoured in a couple of weeks and then set aside until the next big content drop.
True, Riker, but Diablo 4 fails to even last 3 days.
Players have come to expect this pattern from devs. Devs have come to expect this from players. So rather than see devs attempt to shake up that formula to improve retention, to come up with a different plan, we've just sort of grown complacent that this is the way things are and that they're fine like that. I'll never forget, years ago, hearing a Diablo 3 dev acknowledge that people come back to play Diablo at the start of a new season, and then they disappear for 2 months to play other games, and that they're fine with that.
Yeah.
And that blew my mind. Why are you fine with that? I'm not fine with that. Diablo 2 is a game that I came home from school eager to log into every day for months. There were no new content drops. We got like 3 major patches throughout the game's entire lifespan. The core gameplay itself was enough to keep us hooked. I want to be able to log into my ARPG of choice every day for months, years, and not get bored. Throughout my life, I've always found one game to get fixated on for a very long time, and I'd play that game near exclusively. StarCraft, Unreal Tournament.
Well, StarCraft is way different.
Diablo 2, Unreal Tournament 3, StarCraft.
Diablo 2 is also, I honestly feel, slightly an exception to the way that these things kinda happen. Because, well, simply put, Diablo 2 doesn't allow you just to respec and do all of these things. You're supposed to grind a lot, and then you maybe find items that will enable you to do different builds, and then you play it like that. Diablo 2 is longevity, but only if you're fine with grinding for 3 hours and not finding anything even remotely useful. And not a lot of people are fine with that. But as a kids, I mean, we didn't have a lot of choice, okay? I was there in GSP.com, or G2, whatever it was, the forum gold one, and I was botting run escape accounts, bruh. I was doing run escape jobs that people said you need to do this by hand, and I'm like, bot, and then I botted cows with a slingshot, and that's how I got like 2k forum gold, and that was enough to buy anything for a very long time in Diablo 2. Great times. But again, different times.
Warcraft 2, Diablo 3, I spent years on each of these games. I didn't stop playing them after a month and just wait for new content to drop. Now, Diablo 2's model would not be able to retain players today. There's more competition than ever. Gaming has evolved, and that just means that the ARPG genre needs to evolve. We gotta find the new special sauce that it takes to keep us logging in every day. Now, until that happens,
it's not happening. It's never happening. You can't make a good enough game that people are going to want to log in constantly. Because even if you make a good enough game that people want to log on constantly, it needs to be something like raid logging in World of Warcraft. Or it needs to be something that people can just do once, like every 3 days. Or whatever. Because people are not going to stop playing a game just because it's the same game over and over and over and over and over again. Even if it's new stuff, it's still the same game. And that by itself, by nature, gets boring. Anyway, that was Riker. This was Quizzer Sensei. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.